What does it mean to remain in your home? Independence, 3 people said, lots of family contact and little other contact other than virtual. Saving money, comfort, independence, avoid downsizing. So that people want to stay in their home with the stuff that they've grown to love. A chance to reevaluate how I live. Comfort, lower costs, connection to friends and neighbors, inability to hug our grandchildren. So the importance of hugging our grandchildren, having my own garden, being in control, being familiar, independence and control, and comfortable environment. So there are many similarities, but for everyone, this is a real personal issue. And so as we're going through the next 25 minutes or so, think about what's important to you, and that will help really dial in the decisions that you make. So when you're thinking about making plans to remain in your home, these are some of the things that might come to mind. Structure of your home, the home itself, your health, health and wellness, your health care, transportation, your community, and your finances. So when you think about housing, you think about, are you comfortable and safe in your current home? When you think about healthcare, do you have access to the healthcare you need? Do you have access to the transportation you need? Are you a part of a community? Do you have access to social interaction and entertainment? What financial resources do you have? Are you comfortable in your current home? What modifications can you make now before issues arise? So this is, there's a lot to think about around home modification, but I want to point out a really valuable resource AARP has designed that's a really comprehensive resource. This is a guide that you can actually order from AARP for free, and it's super well done. It's a comprehensive resource guide called HomeFit. And it was created as a way to create what AARP calls a lifelong home. So it provides some simple do-it-yourself improvements and some things that are requiring an expert. The link here will take you directly to that information about that guide. It'll actually give you an electronic copy of the guide, but then you can also call and get a guide. And it has some things, really basic solutions, like increasing your lighting and avoiding cords in the middle of the room, to more complicated things like handrails on either side of the stairs, and installing of solid entry or one level entry for a shower, etc. Some of you have been thinking about a lot more than in the past, maybe the setup in your home, because we're all in our homes right now, and some people have organized their closets 6 times, or maybe not. They keep looking at that, broken brick or that comes up in the front yard, and they're thinking, I should really fix that someday, or that loose handle. And so now we're in a place, I think, to actually make those changes because we're at home more and recognizing those sorts of things. So now's a good time to get a copy of this book, check it out, and I encourage you to look at some of these options. It includes these are examples of the worksheets that are included in it that you can download. They actually teach a class of this. AARP actually teaches classes on this. And we've just applied for a grant with the Retirement Center to actually offer more in-depth workshops on this exact thing. Technology is something that is vast, and especially has actually boomed and blown up over the last 10 years, ranging from home monitoring programs that actually can track if you fall in your home. They have more technology that can actually monitor that, and to things as simple, which seem quite provincial these days, the Siri voice command tools like the Echo and the Alexa. And so rather than going deep into those details today, I do want to point out a resource here that's locally run in the Bay Area, out of an effort to try to get unbiased information out there, and also firsthand user information out there about technology. And so the Tech Enhanced website has a lot of resources just on this, but it's formed from these groups of longevity explorers, which are seniors in the Bay Area that get together and discuss and review products. And then they actually influence those products, because this organization, run by a gentleman called Richard Caro, who you might have come to see present, I think last year we did a presentation with him. All of his resources are guided by the input of the older adults, and then they're shared with companies, the sort of giving them direct user experience data to improve their products. So I encourage you to check this out. You know, if you want to know how your Apple Watch works, or you want to choose an alert system in your home, but you're not quite sure how, he has a great a review of how to choose one of these products based on your persona, meaning, are you someone that stays at home all the time? Are you someone that comes and goes a lot, maybe less today than a few months ago? And is a really helpful tool in understanding how to choose these products without the commercial influence of businesses. So the next, oops, I'm sorry. All right. The next one is talking a little bit about alternatives to staying in your home. And we talked about modifications and technology, and really to extend the life of your home, because we all know mostly 90% of people want to stay in their home as they age. But what you'll find later is some examples of the expense, sometimes what it can mean to stay in your home and get care. Some of you may have already experienced that with the care of your parents or the care of your loved one, or even yourself. A few options here. There's 4 that I want to just point out and touch on. Renting space in your home is interesting now that maybe your family there's less family in your house, you have space. Our retirement center started a program called Berkeley Home Match, which pairs graduate students up with retirees of the university, including the Lawrence Berkeley Lab and the Office of the President, to rent the room for a graduate student. Now, with COVID going on right now, we're paused in that we're still in pilot phase, but we're paused because we really need to look closely at our making sure our education and our tools are in place so people can confidently do this. And we've also applied for a 3-year grant to support the organization of it. But when we found that it works really well, that people live well together, and that homeowners actually earn passively up to, on average, $12,000 a year. So when you start to think about the value of your house, you can think about value of your house in terms of what it could make renting space. Roomly is a group we work with that provides, it's a platform that's serving all of the Bay Area and does roommate matching. So you can post your room up there. You can also find people looking for rooms. It's just another resource for renting space in your home. I didn't put Airbnb here, but many of you might be trying that. And there's lots of good literature from AARP about renting through Airbnb or home sharing in that way, or VVRO. Those are the vacation rental program. Another one of them is sabbatical.com. So there's several out there. I wanted to touch on ADU, the accessory dwelling unit option. So they're also known as granny flats or in-law units. They're essentially and they can be detached or attached, located within the living area of the primary house on the property, or a separate unit in the backyard. So usually with their own sleeping, eating, they're kind of self-contained for someone to live there. the California legislature amended the state laws in 2016, requiring cities to make these easier to build. So in theory, local cities have begun lifting regulations, though depending on your city, regulations can still prove challenging, and some may be able to share about that. That's the beauty of these groups. When we have a lot of time, everybody in the room has a story, I think, of how they've done it or haven't done it or have questions. So where I encourage you to check out your local city ordinance to learn the latest about this. The cost for building a ADU, an accessory dwelling unit in the Bay Area with a professional builder ranges from around $150,000 to $200,000 if it's done by code and if it's done by a professional. Village movement was started, it's not home care, it's not a physical residential place. It's more about seniors helping each other stay independent. And it was started actually by a retired social worker out of Boston that said, you know, we can do better to take care of each other. And so it's an intentional group of people in different areas. We have a very active movement in California. There's one in Berkeley and Orinda and Oakland and Palo Alto. They're all over. And so this website here you can find your local village movement. And it's more about people helping each other and staying independent. And so the services they offer to each other is through usually a coordinated central person or office, depending on the size of the village group. Grocery store and doctors, transportation, light gardening, small repairs, you know, they're all over the country, and they also have a busy calendar of cultural, social, and health activities. I have to say, as a gerontologist, I'm a big fan of the village. I think it's really what it's going to take to help fill the holes in of what is otherwise a somewhat broken system to care for our older people. So I encourage you to check out the villages. They're typically member based, meaning, and dues based. So, and they range. The annual rate for one can be $600 to $750 a year, and depending on one person or maybe a couple, to $10 to $60 a month. And so what you'll find later is we're going to look at the overall cost of care and really weighing out the pros and cons and how the village movement fits in there. You can also volunteer as a participant and not without being a member, where you can help out other people. And you might have seen some things in the news about how they're helping people right now, doing friendly calls, medication reminders, and calling people for friendly visiting calls, those sorts of things. And co-housing being the other alternative for staying in your home. I just want to put a plug in for co-housing, a shout out, not to go into it more, but if you're curious about what it is, you can click the link there. We're going to send you these slides, so you'll have them. But what co-housing is it's typically a private residence that contains all the features of conventional homes. However, the residents have access to an extensive common area and common amenities, open space, courtyards, and common house. They usually hold meals together, share tasks, etc. They're really intentional communities focused on connecting socially and sustainable design, sharing resources. So if you want to learn about one and you find it there, or you have a friend that's a part of one, I encourage you. They usually have regular meals when we're not sheltering in place, or they have a communal forum, online forum, message board. You can ask to join and get to know them. They're going to want to get to know you before you join. So it's very much a reciprocal process. And but if you're thinking about starting your own co-housing and you want to buy property with friends, this could actually be pretty useful resource to tap into to do it yourself as well. So Okay, so those are sort of examples of staying in your home, looking at the wellness of your home, the the walls, the bones, considering sort of alternatives for staying in there, extra income. Maybe the ADU is used as for a caregiver. So really thinking about how to stretch the use of your home for as long as possible. And as you can see, it takes some thinking and some planning around that, and some research. Really, the key theme here in planning is researching it before it really becomes an issue. Okay, and so with health and wellness, I wanted to touch on this, really about, do you have the health care you need to stay in your home when you're weak and infirm? And so you may already be thinking about this a lot more. You may have already experienced this if you've had a hip replacement or a knee replacement. Those 3 stairs at the front of your house didn't become as significant until you actually had to figure out how to climb them with limited mobility. So all of those experiences can help you think about how to stay in your home longer, and think about it from a mobility and a wellness perspective. You may find as you age that it gets harder to manage things around the house, things like household chores, meals. Many of you may have uh, initiated a grocery delivery recently, because we've all been asked to shelter in place. So you have experience doing that now, which is a bonus, where you might not have done it before. Or maybe you realize that your neighbors stepped up and really helped you when you didn't know them as well before. So how will they be there for you in 10 years or 5 or 10 years from now? Who is that network that's going to support you? Do you have somebody to help you manage your money or your meds, your medications, or take you to the doctor's office? Or help you with things like washing your hair, getting dressed, or bathing, or toileting. So these are all things, if you want to stay in your house, then it's good to think about how you will manage those, but how you will also pay for those. So generally speaking, Medicare, which is your primary insurer over 65 years of age, does not cover these sorts of services that I just mentioned. It doesn't cover the 24-hour-a-day hit care at home, the meals delivered to your home, homemaker services like shopping, cleaning, laundry, custodial or personal care like bathing, dressing. Medicare doesn't cover those because they're not defined as skilled care. It has to be defined as skilled care that must be performed by a skilled professional or under their supervision. Now, some long-term care insurance policies cover these. You can maybe pull that out if you haven't looked at that in a while. Those can sometimes cover these home services. Medicare Advantage insurances are starting to cover some of these, like meal deliveries and transportation, some limited versions of this. So what we're talking about here is really home care. And so I wanted to just point at what is home care, because it embodies what we are talking about. So getting these sorts of support with these items like companionship, personal care, grocery and personal shopping. Now, I mentioned that the villages can be very helpful with this, the village movement. You may have a friend that can help you with some of this, but not the other things. You might be caring for a loved one that is starting to need more and more care, and so your current network isn't working like it was maybe 3, 4 years ago. And so that's when you think about, okay, I'm going to pay somebody to come in and care for me or my mother or my father or my husband or my wife. And so like I said, these are generally not covered under Medicare. They're usually covered out of pocket. And the average cost per hour for this sort of service is $28 an hour. And in the Bay Area, it's closer to like $33 an hour. And they may charge a 4-hour minimum, and once again, not covered by Medicare. So as you start to think about that, you start to think, well, how can I can just hire someone, a student, to come in and take care of me or something to that effect, do these household chores. What we learned with our home matching program is that we did not include an option for work exchange with our students living at the homes of retirees. And that's in part, a large part, because it takes some level of training, and there's some level of liability there too. And also, it was feedback from the students, while many of them help without asking, I think, is that there's a lot going on for them to be able to manage their schoolwork and also live in a place. So some of the passively earned income can be used to cover the cost of care. Though, $20 to $33 an hour adds up quick. So you may think about hiring somebody outside of an agency. I've included in the links in the packet you'll get is, what does it mean to hire your own person to come in without an agency? Typically, they can be about 30% lower in costs. Though you just want to think about different items there, like liability, and also what if they're sick, could you get somebody quickly to refill their place? But it's doable, people do it, and there's a good resource that will provide you with after this session. And I also wanted to mention a geriatric care manager. If you're not familiar with what a geriatric care manager is, they're a licensed social worker, usually specialized in geriatrics, which is the care of older adults. And they're like a professional relative who helps you, find the things to meet your needs. I've put a link to the National Association of Care Managers at the bottom of a packet that we'll send out to you today. They can range, a good care manager, they can range to be about $120 to $140 an hour, and they often have a 4-hour minimum. I will say they're worth their weight in gold if you've never used one before. They usually are called on in a panic because it's hard to figure out in the moment how to solve a challenging situation. So I encourage you, this is the whole hope for planning in advance. But if you should need a professional, they really will go the extra mile to help you find services and understand what those services mean. Some will advocate on your behalf with insurance companies, et cetera. So try researching that, and if it's in your budget, that you can certainly benefit from that. So thinking about transportation and getting around, this may be a little bit more, you might be thinking about this a little bit more now when you haven't been able to travel as much, you're homebound more, and it may have been I think it's a grieving process for many of us, but we also get to connect, which has opened up a whole new world for us, and it's been a good test for us to, what are our options when we become a little bit more homebound. But what does your transportation look like, and what does your community, network look like? And do you have support in place in your home? Is your neighborhood, does it look the same as it did 20 years ago? Do you know your neighbors? Are you close to the things that are important to you? So this especially is all of these things come into play when you're maybe comparing this about moving into someplace else. You want to stay in your home. Oftentimes, with retirement communities, as some people really don't like to think about them, but they have been an incredible lifeline to many people. And actually, there's a world of people right at your doorstep that you can just walk out and see and meet, and entertainment galore just right there at your doorstep. And more have become sophisticated in their, it's not just bingo anymore. Some of these communities have widened their options to meet a more sophisticated audience. And so, but thinking about that might come up when you're thinking about your home. So let's think about transportation. One statistic that I looked up is that depending on if you have a lease in your car, or if you drive it a lot, it can cost up to $600 a month to keep a car. Now that really varies. I mean, in the city, I was paying $350 a month to park my car. And so that became a really easy decision to make, to get rid of my car and use quick car rentals, on-demand rentals, and Uber and Lyft and those sorts of things. So um, uh, just something to think about. But, if you like your car, if you love driving, then this, and you can afford it, then really and it's not hurting your bottom line, then keep your car, because it gives you enjoyment. It gets you to where you want to go. You love driving it on, etc. So, but if it's just sitting there and you're holding on to it out of habit, you can think about where the cost savings is if you're starting to look at saving costs. There are also a couple of classes out there. AARP offers one, and AAA offers one. There are links to them on the slides that we'll send out to you. One's for safe drivers, specifically aimed at more mature drivers or older drivers, and also ones that take you through the bells and whistles of new cars. They can sometimes be distracting. There's an overcorrect feature if you drive over the line where the wheels come back online, and where that seems safe to me, it makes me so nervous that I can't end up driving the car. So it pulls out some of those things, and they'll give you usually an insurance deduction too. You can get it off your premium if you take those courses. And then for transportation options, let's use the raised hand feature again. How many people have used a ride sharing program, Uber or Lyft, before? If you don't have a smartphone, there's a pretty good little program which is called GoGo Grandparent. You can use it even if you're not a grandparent. But if you don't have a smartphone, it's a great concept. You basically can call them and they will call you, or you can call it. You can be in, Washington, D.C. and request a ride for your parent, or your loved one, and that they can get a car to come pick them up. It's a little extra service, but it really can be a lifeline to people that need a ride someplace. There's another one called Silver Ride, which is it's also a link in the bottom of the slides, which is, I think they drive mostly PT Cruisers when they first came out, but they are aimed at older adults to help them get their groceries back and forth from the car to the house. They go a little, it's like a nice, generous taxi cab driver that'll do that for a few extra bucks. This program this service does this as a part of their full package. And in some cases, Uber, you can choose a van or a wheelchair van option when you order an Uber. So that can be a big plus for if you've been disabled for just a while, you've got a wheelchair and you need to get to your doctor's appointments. That can be a big lifeline. You can also, of course, there's the East Bay Paratransit, which is a 24-hour notice. I think it's $7, and it's one way. You have to call them a day in advance, but it is their ramp vans or vans, so they will pick you up if you need that as well. This is especially what you may start to think about. I mean, this is, oh, I don't need that. I've got my daughter that'll do that, or I don't need this. My neighbor will take me. Well, it's especially important to identify who is that person that is your ally or advocate that can take care of some of these things for you. And if you don't have them, there are options, but it's always good to identify someone that can help you and make that friendship now. Let them know your needs. It also carries over to your trust and your legal documents. If you've got your firstborn son identified as your power of attorney, and they live in New Jersey, they're not going to be the most helpful person to make decisions for you in the moment here on the ground. So it's all about thinking about who is your ally that can help you. Once again, the village membership does provide access to transportation. Senior centers also give rides to the grocery store and Costco. Of course, all of those right now are relatively suspended, but trying their best, I think, to get back to regular business. All right, let's touch on the finance. That's always fun to think about. It's not all that affordable to grow old and sick in this country. So I want to show you a chart that you'll receive also in the slide deck. So as we talked about, the reality is that Medicare only pays for short-term rehabilitative really care. I mean, that you are having some skilled level of care is what Medicare covers. And most of these services that we're talking about to support independence, like help around the house, rides to the doctor's office, home repairs, there are options we can talk about them to cover these services through different programs, though we're limited. And so I just wanted to give you a range because I think I want to wrap up soon so we can open it up for questions. That it's expensive. Adult daycare, which is suspended right now, but some of them are coming back, can be a real helpful if you have a loved one with dementia and you as a caregiver need a break, and you can pay $80 a day. They'll get a meal, some socialization, and you'll get a break during the day to do the errands that you need to do. That's an affordable option, and good to know if you want to stay in your home. It adds up, but it doesn't add up to living in an assisted living, which can be upwards to over $100,000 a year. And it ranges. So in the Bay Area, we're particularly high. I mean, the Genworth study that shows these costs shows averages that are actually quite lower than the Bay Area. So these costs are really, you may have found something that's more affordable, though this is just a range and usually higher in the Bay Area. But if you go out to Fresno or Chico, or you may find things that are more affordable. Also, assisted livings can range from 100-unit buildings, real fancy like Belmont Village, to a mom and pop run assisted living, which a residential home with 4 or 5 beds. So they range, but they can be equally as good quality. They're all licensed the same way, though. They just look very different. So we do a whole nother class on the different things about care, different homes and how homes differ, senior homes. So maybe we'll get that up online soon too. So, but I just wanted to show you the range, and most people can expect 1 to 2 years of this level of high level of help care in their life towards the end of your life. So if you're self-insured or you have a long-term care insurance policy, you can cover 2 years of this without dipping into too deeply into your estate or your reserves. Though if you want to have somebody rent a room in your home, you could be making $12,000 a year to help supplement some of these expenses. Once again, this is very low. The Bureau of Labor Statistics says how much does it cost to live in your home. Healthcare for some is more than others. Take from this what you will and leave the rest behind. But generally in the Bay Area, maybe your annual expenses outside of any of the things we've talked about just to live is around $50,000. And so if you add that to $75,000 on top of that, you start to get a sense of what long-term care costs. And then there's always the shifting tides of the cost of healthcare too. And that can range depending on if you have Kaiser or if you have, some of the more Blue Cross Blue Shields, the higher programs. You will find in the slide set a number of examples of ways that you can maybe maximize the coverage of your long-term care at home, because it really does start to become a cost issue. And your IRA may allow for an medical expense deduction. You can leverage your home. Actually, home equity conversion mortgages have gotten quite safe now. There was a time when there was some issues with them, but there are programs where you can use these programs in a safe way. There's a link to that at the bottom. But really, at the end of the day, it really has to be what's most important to you in your life. That will help you prioritize because these are very personal decisions that only you can make. There's no magic fairy that's going to come and make these decisions for you. They can put options in front of you, but we all have to make these ourselves. And so, and how will your friends or family be able to help out? Who's your advocate?